Minister, good morning to you. I know you have a busy day talking to the public service unions a little bit later in the morning. Why Andrew Costa for this new role?
Well, that's a selection made by the Public Service Commissioner in New Zealand. Our law means that all public service positions are made independently of ministers. And in this case, Andrew Costa, as you know, has a very strong career of public service behind him. And in his most recent role as the police, and the observation I would make is that as police commissioner, he has seen the way that police often have to be the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff for people who act in criminal ways and victimise other New Zealanders. In that role, he's really seen the need to prevent people often becoming criminals in the first place, and he has a real interest in how that is better achieved. And with social investment, that's one of the things we are very interested in. Given the enormous amount of investments that the government makes, how can we ensure that they better prevent crime and other negative things for our community happening in this place?
Okay, fair enough. So you had absolutely no say in this. No one came to you and said, what do you think if we put this guy in?
Well, the way it works, Sean, is that we describe the attributes that we think a chief executive will need. We contribute to that job.
My question was, did you have any say? Did you have effectively right of veto, no matter what the rule book says, what happens in the real world, or what happened in the real world?
Well, what I'm describing to you is the way that we have influence on the recruitment process, which is that we do get to be clear about what our expectations of a role are and what the attributes are that we're looking for in someone to perform that role. So in that sense, I had an influence by being clear what I saw the social investment agency's function as the attributes of someone who would be able to provide that leadership. And against those measures, obviously, Andrew Costa came up very strongly.
Okay. It would be fair to say, however, justified or not, and I've just made the observation, he did nothing, didn't put a foot wrong as police commissioner. There was no scandal around him. He did a difficult job for 3 years and survived the incoming new government. But he has created or has been targeted by some, and I would suggest the most extreme amongst the anti-vax movement. He's been, and I would say some on, I hate to use the term, the far right of politics in New Zealand, as Cuddles Costa, some sort of corrupt, super liberal guy into transgenderism and every trendy cause that is going. That perception of him, I'm not saying it's the reality, is most certainly abroad in some circles. Does that possibly inhibit his ability to be effective in the new role?
Well, look, I would just look at his recent performance as police commissioner, where under his leadership we saw that really successful approach with Comancheros. I was delighted to see so many Comancheros arrested and being brought to justice. He worked with Mark Mitchell to have more police on the beat, as it were, actually patrolling our city streets. And I know people in Auckland and elsewhere have commented to me how much of a difference that is already making. He adapted to the government's new law and order approach, which is much tougher than the last government. We've got a much stronger set of policies against gangs.
And my question was, do public perceptions about him, and I'd counter that by saying, failed to have a police force that intervened at Albert Park to prevent the assault on women, including Posey Parker. Changed our rules about policing, or appeared to change our rules about the policing of public disorder to give demonstrators and those who interfered with the rights of New Zealanders more rights than people going about their lawful business, right?
Well, look, Sean, the comment that I'm simply making is that since we have been government, there has been a significant shift in law and order priorities in our approach to these justice issues, and we've had a much tougher approach. There's no getting away from the fact that is a big change from the previous government. Now, I've also pointed to you examples where we think the police commissioner has demonstrated a willingness to change the approach of the police in line with the new government's expectations. I think that's good to see. I think Mark Mitchell in his role and Paul Goldsmith in his role as Justice are continuing to work at pace to toughen up our law and order system, because we have been very concerned about the amount of crime happening in New Zealand and about the sense that some criminals have had that they can get away with it. And we don't think that should be the case.
All right, let's close off on Costa. As I said, you're going to talk to the PSA today. Unfortunately, it's a closed session, so media won't be able to report the speech. But, boy, we had such an interesting day on the program yesterday, Minister, when we started this discussing what was interpreted as a call for public servants to get back into the office, particularly in Wellington, and really one of the most 3 hours of the most interesting input from our audience I've ever experienced. And some backlash, it would be fair to say, against, the terrible notion that you might have to get off your ass and go to work. What have you made of the reaction to that announcement on Monday?
Well, I think that our policy represents common sense, and I think that the vast majority of public servants would understand it and would agree with it, which is that, number one, we think that working from home arrangements are not an entitlement. They are to be agreed to together with employers and employees by agreement, not entitlement. That too, they should only be agreed to where they're consistent with an employee being able to perform their role in a way that doesn't compromise their performance or the performance of their team or the performance of the agency as a whole, because what we do in our jobs is not just about the individual things we do, it's about being available to other team members, asking questions, it's about being in meetings and contributing. And then three, that where working from home's happening, there should be adequate oversight and monitoring so that managers and chief executives have good awareness of how many people are meant to be in the office on a given day and where the arrangements that are in place are working. Those are all pretty reasonable things. Will there still be some flexibility for some people? Yes. But is it right for employers to make sure their policies are actually consistent with their organisations performing well? Of course it should be.